look at reality, but we have a special open canvas presentation that we're going to do this afternoon, and I'm going to let Mark introduce our guest.
All right.
I'll mess his name up.
How are you doing today, Thomas?
Pretty good, except I'm you know my tongue.
Okay. No. Let's get started then. Other than when Nancy Red Star was a hostess 3 years ago, Merrell was the first big name on Revolution Radio, and his fascinating discussions about UFOs helped to grow Revolution Radio to a world source of news and enthralling discussions. Welcome, Merrell Fankhauser.
Good to be here with you guys again this morning. It's morning for me here in California, 9 o'clock.
You were just on with us on the Monday night show about 3 weeks ago, and you were still in the studio recording your new CD. What's the status of the recording now?
Well, as you know, I started out, I got these radio signals that were sent to me from author Michael Luckman of the Extraterrestrial Research Center in New York, and they sent me these radio signals that this old World War II Army guy picked up in the ocean in front of Malibu, California. And they sent them to me and said, hey, what do you think of this? And when I listened to them, I immediately heard a song, kind of a throwback to my 60s days of doing instrumental surf with a sort of, I had to call it a sci-fi James Bond twist to it. And I sat down in about 15 minutes and wrote out the music and then called in my band, and within 3 hours we had the first song, Signals to Malibu, finished. And it features these radio signals going through it. And then a few days later, I realized there was about 4.5 minutes of these signals that I hadn't even listened to. So I put on the signals and started listening to them, and I went out in my studio and sat down at the piano and put on the headphones, and I thought, oh, what the heck, I'll just push record just in case. And I started playing this piano part along with these other signals. And when I got done, I couldn't even believe it was me that was playing it, because I didn't even know what I had played. And it gave me goosebumps when I listened to it. So I called that one Messages from the Dome. And I got my violinist, Sal Garza, in here. And I had some ideas for violin and cello parts. And we finished that one off, and it came out kind of a symphonic sounding. So I got really inspired, and I kept writing songs. And I think, Thomas and Mark, this is the fastest album, other than my first surf album that we recorded live with the band in 1962. This is the fastest album I ever recorded. From writing the songs beginning to the end, I have to look at the calendar, but I have to say it was under a month, and we just finished the whole album, Signals from Malibu, the other day.
Oh, so wow. It's gonna be available sometime soon?
Yes, it'll be available December 1st, and we've already got the graphics for the cover done, and it's just gonna go to being printed now and printing the first batch of CDs. I've contacted a couple of record labels that are interested, but I've already got pre-orders for it from people that had heard me on your radio show and other shows. And so I decided I'm going to print up maybe 300 or so myself, just so I have them. So people will be able to order it direct from me at first from merrellfankhauser.com, and that's MERRELLFANKHAUSER.com. So December 1st, it'll be ready.
And to let the listeners know, if you check out the archives from a couple of weeks back, it was the first time that he played it on air anywhere.
Exactly.
The sounds, I think that was awesome of you to allow us to be the first ones.
Yeah, I just thought, Thomas, that maybe I should cue this up because I only had it on digital tape in the studio. So I walked in there with the cordless phone and held it up to the speakers, and you were the first guys to broadcast it.
Yeah, it's like we were getting exclusive from the Tiki Lounge studio.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So, Merle, why do you think that these mysterious sounds just really put the hooks in you and inspired you to just knock a CD out in such a short time?
You know, that question is hard to answer, Mark, because I've had, as I think I mentioned when I was talking to you all before, I've had inspiration come through quite a few times where you hear a song and you really don't know where it's coming from, and usually the best ones get written down in about 15 minutes, and you've either got to have all the music written down or recorded on something, so you don't forget it, because it's easy to forget them. And I don't know, this just triggered something in me. I mean, I've always been a UFO enthusiast since I was a little kid, and my dad was a flight instructor and taught me to fly, and he was very open-minded, and I was always talking to him about UFOs and everything, flying saucers back in the late 50s, and he believed, that there had to be something else out here in the universe, and because we had both studied aeronautics quite a bit, we understood the mechanics of a saucer-shaped vehicle. So I don't know if maybe all of my interest in that, and then just the thought that maybe these could be extraterrestrial signals, or if it triggered something in me and I actually channeled the music. I mean, I'm open to that too. But the one thing that I did hear, each one of those signals, there was two signals in one, and there was like a bottom layer and an upper layer, and I could hear that with my ears like it was a stereo signal almost. And that was confirmed to me by a local engineer that ran it through an oscilloscope and said, yeah, you're right, there's two layers to these things. And then the other night when I was on Tina Marie's show, she said the same thing. She ran the signals that she had through a scope, and she found the same thing. And the thing that's come up, though, now that I did realize is Port Hueneme, where the Naval Air Station is there, and there's also a submarine testing area there. So, there is a possibility it could be some kind of new code that our Navy is doing. But I played it for a Navy sonar radio guy, and he said, no, that's not anything I ever heard. He said this would have to be something way different. But the other thing that I just found out a few days ago is that the Chumash Indian tribe, that was the ancient Indians that lived up and down the California coast here, and they still have their groups and they get together and everything, and there's still a lot of Chumash ruins and things in different areas. They claim that the anomaly off the coast of Malibu that's underwater is actually a 10,000-year-old building that was part of the civilization of the lost continent of Mu, that the Mu people had something to do with that. And they said that's when the ocean level at one point was lower than it is now, and the thing would have been out of the water. So, you know, that kind of, because I've studied mu before and, you know, did all that exploration in Hawaii, I had never heard anything like that. So that really sparked my
unique
interest.
sound. I've got to admit, I've never heard anything like it either.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing, Thomas, is the guy that picked this up, he was a radio expert, and in the Second World War, the way I heard it, his job was to pinpoint where the Japanese were broadcasting from on these little islands and atolls, and he pinpointed exactly where they were coming from out in the ocean, but he didn't even at that point know there was any building or anything under the water there.
Right. That hasn't been disclosed too long. I think it was Jimmy Church who first brought it to everybody's attention.
Well, supposedly Robert Stanley was the guy that first saw it quite a while ago.
But the first time I heard it was through Jimmy Church's show that he had on it.
Yeah. But the Chumash Indian said, oh, yeah, that's in our legends. That goes back hundreds of years about the ruins. And the interesting thing, up in the mountains of Malibu, there are these monolithic carved rock structures that have petroglyphs on them. And they say that that's in a straight line with this building that's out in the ocean. And I used to surf Malibu when I was a kid in my teenagers. I'd drive down there. It's, you know, about not quite a 2-hour drive from where I live up on the Central Coast. And we heard these stories from other surfers that lived in the area, and they said they would, you know, sometimes have a little beach party or a bonfire on the beach, and they kept seeing these things coming in and out of the water. Well, we all laugh because up here around Pismo Beach, at sunset, you'll see these big pelicans fishing, and they dive in the water, you know, and I thought, well, that's what they're seeing, and maybe it's just, you know, the way their wings are or something that they're, nobody really called them UFOs back then, but they said there was something odd coming in and out of the water in that area. So I haven't seen these monolithic ruins that are in the mountains of Malibu, but we're going to go down there with a film crew because we're working on a little documentary about this right now, and we've started on a video for one of the songs. So we're going to go down there and try to get some of this on video.
Oh, that's awesome. The first song you want me to play is Signals from Malibu, right?
Yeah, that's the first one that I was inspired to record.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and play it for everybody.
Wonderful.
All right, here we go, folks. Wow, I really like that. That was
All right,
awesome.
so that's the first time you heard it, Thomas?
Yes, sir. I waited until today just to get the impression that the audience would get.
Yeah.
It sounds
a
little funny to us here in Skype, but out there on the air it doesn't.
You know what I noticed listening to it now is, I don't know if it has something to do with Skype or the MP3, but it actually played a little slower than it actually is.
It was probably the Skype.
Yeah. But a thing I wanted to mention, Thomas, after I had recorded the song in my studio and I mixed it over to digital tape, to DAT, and that's what I usually mix everything down to. And then I burn it to a CD from there. Well, when it got to that part in the middle, about the middle of the song, where the signals come out of the background more pronounced, the CD burner quit. It wouldn't record past that point. And I thought, what the heck is going on here? Maybe I got a flawed disc. So I put another CD in the burner, started all over again. Same thing. As soon as it got to that point where right before that little drum roll where the signals come out kind of loud, shut me down again. I went through 4 CDs thinking, I even started taking them from the bottom of the stack thinking, well, maybe I got several flawed ones on the top. And it was patched in digitally, going from the DAT machine to the CD burner. And I thought, well, maybe this isn't a flawed disc, it's something else. So I decided to do it analog. I took the analog outputs from the DAT machine to the analog inputs in the CD burner, and guess what? It worked perfectly. So
there was actually something messing with the electronics then.
Exactly. Something in those signals right in that one spot in the middle, it didn't like it. It said, no, sir, you're not going any further. And then I just thought, maybe I'll go back to old school and do it analog. And I still like actually the sound of analog in ways better than digital because it's warmer and smoother.
Well, music was really meant to be heard live, not recorded.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that from so many people.
I myself like the sound of a record, vinyl.
There
that's what
you go.
People of our age grew up listening to vinyl.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and there are still record companies that put out vinyl LPs, and I found these tapes that I did with my band Merrell and the Exiles from about 1964 to 66, and I recorded up in the Lancaster, area, the high desert of California near Mojave, at this little record company there called Glen Records. Well, in 1999, the owner passed away, and his son got all of this stuff, and it was in these archives. He had Ricky Nelson's guitar player recordings and Buck Owens and stuff that didn't get released that we recorded, and he just put on the shelf. Well, he had a bunch of my tunes that were on the shelf for a good 48 years. And the son called me up and said, Merle, we found these boxes of reel-to-reel tapes with your name on it. Do you want them? And I said, I sure do. And I went over there, and I couldn't believe it when I saw them. And they actually had some of my very first vocal single from 1964, Too Many Heartbreaks, that were still in the boxes, leftover stock that didn't sell. And I got all that from them. I put the tapes on. And here's the weird thing, Thomas. The son, when he closed down the studio, his dad's studio, his dad had moved way out further in the desert when he closed the studio down. He took all his records in his reel-to-reel master tapes and put them in a freezer truck out in the middle of the desert. And they sat there for years. And I guess the only thing that saved them was that freezer truck was so insulated.
Yeah, you're lucky.
It did have a fine layer of that desert sand on it, and I thought, and I still have a reel-to-reel 2-track tape machine, and I thought, oh boy, I better clean this or it's going to ruin the heads for sure. So I cleaned it with film cleaning pads, got all the dirt off, and then I would master each song as it went along over to digital, and I was hearing stuff that I didn't even remember writing, but I could tell it was me singing and my band I had at the time. So I mastered enough to make an album out of it, and I called it the Lost Desert Tapes. And this label that's put out a few things on me in Germany is putting that out the 1st of December, and they're putting it out on vinyl LP.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they're even going to take 2 songs and put them out on a 45. And they said, oh, yeah, there's still disc jockeys here in Germany that play vinyl.
Oh, there is all over the place.
Yeah, I know that these DJs that do nothing but instrumental surf music that contact me all the time, a lot of them are still playing vinyl over the air, and I think that's pretty neat. And what they tell me is, even the big record companies will print up, 15 or 20,000 of some well-known artist on vinyl, and they say they're gone in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So vinyl is still out there. It never really completely died.
For those who are too young to know what we're talking about, there was some big flat black things.
Called records.
Yeah, that you all use for frisbees.
Yeah, called records. And it's funny when you still call something an album. Us older guys think of it as a vinyl album, and then you tell a kid, a young guy now, an album, well, they naturally think you're talking about a CD. So the two meanings have kind of crossed over now.
Mm-hmm. I do that too. Merle, were you kind of going for what do you say, like an uneasy or an unnerving feeling at the opening of the last song?
Well, I can't say, Mark, that I was even going for anything. It was like leading me, and I purposely started it out with those signals for a few measures, because I wanted people to hear those signals naked by themselves at the beginning before I started the music. And then, like I said, when I first heard that first set of signals, for some reason it made me think of an old James Bond movie in that low kind of instrumental surf guitar sound that was popular back then. Dwayne Eddy did a lot of that, and then there was a song called The Lonely Surfer by Jack Nietzsche that had that kind of low, mysterious surf sound. And it just came out that way. I really didn't have anything, conceived in my mind as to how the song was going to go or anything. I probably only listened to 2 minutes of those signals, and I heard a whole song in my head. And then I just went in the studio real quick, started writing the notes and the chords down, and then I just turned on a little machine that I have in there just to capture stuff real quick so I don't lose the feeling and forget the melody. And then when I brought the band in, they listened to it and went, wow, let's cut it. And so we only rehearsed it maybe 2 times, and we got it on the first take.
It sounds to me as though you were actually channeling the music.
That's what I feel. Not to get too cosmic, I've never really completely admitted that I've been channeled, but I told this story before. In the 70s, in the 60s, I used to write at a little publishing company on the corner of Cahuenga and Vine in Hollywood. And Harry Nilsson, who was a friend of mine and a great writer, we both recorded that song, Everybody's Talking, and his became the big hit and was in the movie Midnight Cowboy. He and I wrote in adjoining offices for this publishing company. And then much later, in the early 70s, I'd moved to Maui, and I hadn't seen him in years, and he invited me over. I was going to be recording in L.A. anyway, and I flew in, and they picked me up, and he said he's having a party at his house, and he'd like for me to come to the party. So I went to the party, and there's about 30 people there in the living room, and I opened the door, and the first thing I noticed, John Lennon was sitting over in the corner. And he said, "This is my friend Merrell from Maui, and he's going to play us a song." And that's the only time in my life I kind of got stage fright. Never happened again, and my lips started twitching a little bit. And I went, "Merrell, get it together." So anyhow, I played this song called On Our Way to Hana, which was about seeing a flying saucer, and it became a hit in the islands back in 1976. And I played that, and right away John said, "That's an interesting song. What inspired that?" So he and I started talking, and we started talking about songwriting, and he was saying, "Isn't it odd, this feeling that'll come over you sometime, and you get this kind of nervous feeling, and you know something's going to come out?" And I said, "You're exactly right. That's the same feeling I get, and it's almost like if you don't capture it and get it down right away, it goes away." And he said the same thing I did. He says, "Well, my best songs were written in 15 minutes. And he said it frustrated the heck out of me when he was recording with the Beatles after their first album. He'd write a song, and he felt like in 2 weeks the freshness of it went away. And he said sometimes it would take him months to get into the studio to record the next batch of songs. And to him, that was frustrating. So, I don't know if we're being channeled or what. Mike Luckman, the author of Alien Rock, he has this new hypothesis that maybe some of us are being channeled by aliens. And then he went on to say, I think the people that are being channeled to do heavy metal, they're influenced by the negative aliens.
It's an interesting look at
myself. Mark.
I was just going to say that, this is just an interesting look at the creative process. It's like, we're including how John Lennon wrote songs. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
See, I do the same thing with my artwork. When I start doing something in paint shop, I don't know what I'm about to create, but in the end, it all falls together. And if I don't capture it right then, if I stop in the middle of something, when I come back to it, I've done lost it.
Exactly, Thomas. I've heard that from so many artists, painters, that say the exact same thing, that if you stop in the middle of it, you've lost it. It's like you get in this bubble and you've got to do it. And getting back to that songwriting thing, Harry and I were working for this publishing company. That was around 1968 in Hollywood. We had to crank out 8 songs a week to get our $75 a week salary. And
wow.
he was working downstairs in the United California Bank as a teller. Because he didn't go out and play live. He hated playing live. But he would write songs, and then he'd do his shift in the bank. But we would do everything we could to try to conjure up inspiration to turn in our 8 songs so we'd get our $75 a week. And then, if somebody picked them up and recorded the songs, you'd get royalties off of them. But until that happened, all you got was this $75 a week. So we'd go down to this local coffee shop and sit around and spoof on whatever was happening in the room to try to get an idea for writing a song and scratch it out on our pad and then go back upstairs to the piano and the tape recorders and guitar and crank it out.
Well, speaking of cranking it out, how about we play this other song, Message to the Dome?
Yeah, Messages from the Dome. And this one, if you listen to it, Thomas, the key that these, and I didn't realize this till my violinist pointed out, Merrell, you're playing in the same key that these things are being broadcast in. And I didn't even realize that till he pointed it out. And at one point, it almost sounds like the thing is yodeling. It gets into this high pitch, that kind of thing. And I don't know if it was guiding my fingers because I had no idea what I was playing or where it was going till I finished and heard it. Like doing a painting. You stand back and look at it and go, oh, now I get it.
Okay, here we go, folks. Messages from the Dome. tell you what, that was pretty awesome.
All right, yeah, my violinist Sal Garza did all those string parts on there, and he's great. He can play bluegrass, he can play rock, he's classically trained, he plays in symphonies, and he's quite a versatile guy. Yeah.
The piano and the noise, or the sound in the background, just, man, that went off great.
Yeah, did you hear that? Where it almost sounded like it was playing with the piano, that oscillating sound. See, and that last high-pitched sound wasn't in the first song. And when I wrote the first song, I just used the signals as long as they were till the first song ended. And then after I listened to the rest, I went, hey, wait a minute.
Tell everybody where they can order that. I'm being asked by a lot of people.
Okay, well, yeah, the whole album, like I said, I've already got some pre-orders, and it'll be ready to ship by December 1st after Thanksgiving, and you can order it by, well, if you want to physically send a check or a postal money order, you can send it to Ocean Records at P.O. Box 1504, Arroyo Grande, ARROYO, California, 93421. And it's in the United States, it'll be $18 post-paid for the entire album, Signals from Malibu by Merrell Fankhauser. Or you can just go to my website at merrellfankhauser.com. That's MERRELLFANKHAUSER.com, and you can order it direct from there. And the cover, Thomas, I did want to mention, it has a picture of the underwater anomaly off of Malibu on the cover, and there's a UFO on that cover also on the front. And then the back has a different angle of the anomaly, and you can see these pillars that it has, and it has a big opening in the middle. And the thing that struck me is that it's got like a dome-shaped roof on it, and it's almost 2,000 feet across. And author Michael Luckman wants to get, he knows somebody that has an ROV, an underwater unmanned sub with video cameras on it, and have it go down and go into that opening and see what they can see in there. And I'd sure like to.
Wait for that now. I'm
yeah, because when I wrote the last song, I was thinking underwater, and I was thinking, boy, if I had some great underwater footage to go with this, that would make an awesome video. But like I said, we are going to make a video documentary about making the whole album and writing these songs, and show some of the anomaly that we have.
So if you're a videographer and have that equipment, go to that website and offer your services up.
Well, I got my whole crew, because I do a TV show here, and we've got all the cameras and a crew and everything, and there's even a real professional filmmaker that's worked with me from Detroit, Charlie Booth, and he's thinking of coming out here and helping us work on it too.
That would be great.
Yeah, we're going to try to do this, and we've actually shot some footage in the studio of recording the song already, so we'll be working on it.
I can't wait for it.
Yeah, switching from being rock and roll lead guitarist to doing something like one of Beethoven's piano sonatas, really shows how much that you were impacted by these mysterious sounds.
Exactly. When I played it for Sal Garza, the violinist, the piano part with the signals, and he went, "Who played the piano?" And I said, "I did." And I don't consider myself a piano player. I mean, I know chords. I'm no rock out Jerry Lee Lewis piano player, but I can play, and I can play electronic keyboard, for background parts. And he said, "No way, you played that?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "Now you're a classical pianist," and he was laughing. Then when I started telling him, and I had some notes I wrote down for cello and violin and viola, and he went, "Merrell, this is fantastic." He said, "This is a classical symphony." And that made me feel good, and I've always liked all kinds of music, everything from jazz to classical to country to rock, and it's that was one thing back in the 60s. The record companies were always trying to get me to write a real commercial hit, after I had a few songs that did well on the radio, and I wanted to do something more out of the box. And before this even came along and I even knew anything about the signals, my drummer and I were putting some insulation in the studio, and we were talking about, what's the next project going to be? We haven't worked on anything in quite a while now, because I get busy doing concerts and doing the monthly TV show that I have to shoot and turn into all these stations. And I told him, I said, I want to do something completely out of the box, something really different. And it seemed like it wasn't even 2 or 3 days later, Mike Luckman calls me up and says, "Hey, man, I've got something for you to listen to." And that's how the whole thing got started. I didn't know how far out of the box it was going to be.
Well, I don't think it's that far out of the box myself. I think it's an awesome tune, and I think that you're going to be surprised at how many people actually are going to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's just different than being like I think Mark was thinking, a rock and roll guitar player. That all of a sudden you're writing a symphony. Most rock and roll guitar players, they're into their effects and their pedals and all of that.
I happen to like when they do use other instruments besides drum, bass, and lead guitar.
Me too. It's like painting a picture, like you were
Can't
saying.
Use 3 colors.
Exactly. You've got all these colors, and it's like I've got an arsenal of guitars. I've got 12 strings, I got Dobros, I got 6-string Martins, I've got my old 1962 Jazzmaster that I played surf guitar on, I got a Telecaster, I've got my new Merrell Fankhauser signature guitar that was built. So all of those are like different tools that I can use to make these different sounds on the records.
Well, we've already had a couple comments in the chat room about, the messages from the dome was, eerie. Well, it does have a haunting feel to it, and another person said it really brought her to tears. So you're already getting some powerful feedback already.
Wow, that's something, because my girlfriend, Jane, she was in our office and she was doing some kind of bookwork or something in there, and I had finished the song and she said, "Let me hear it, I want to hear it." And she put it on and she wouldn't quit playing it. She played it about 6 times. And she walked out of the room saying, "Oh, I feel so good and so peaceful." And then I started getting the same thing from other people that listened to it here in the studio. And at that point, it hadn't been on the radio or anything. So it does seem to have some kind of a calming effect, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought it was very, very soothing myself. I didn't find any of it eerie, One person said it almost brought him to tears.
That's amazing. I really like that, and that's what I wanted to get, Thomas, was feedback from people and feedback about the signals. What they felt when they were hearing those signals. But I'm so glad you guys got the feedback already, and you can tell me on the air.
Oh, we got quite a few people in our chat room, which isn't really anywhere near how many people are tuned in, but I've gotten several messages on Skype and people in the chat room.
And this will be up on some kind of a podcast later?
I will make it into a podcast. Now, we might have a little problem with the copyright. We'll have to get together, and you'll probably have to...
Oh, that's okay. I can give you the okay on that.
You know, other than that, I will put it up in the next couple of days.
Oh, good. Send me a link, because I want to send it to all of my fans that maybe have missed it, and my music business people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get that to you.
Oh, definitely. I'm really honored that you did come on our show a couple weeks back, and was the first place that you played the sounds. And I think it's part of music history now. So
yeah, to my knowledge,
we are
Thomas,
tied in with the Wipeout guy.
Yeah, to my knowledge, you guys were the first one that played those signals on the radio anywhere. I know if you look, you can find them posted on the internet now, but nobody had played them over the radio.
Right. Well, you even said that night that it
had
been done.
And,
Merrell, I've spoken with people from some bands. They've said that they like YouTube because people are still listening to the music they did 40 years ago. Other people are a little upset. It's like, well, you're listening to it, I'm not getting paid. Other people say, oh, YouTube's great because it's a way for me to just get my foot in the door with so much competition out there. Where do you stand on all these new forms of marketing yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mark, because at first, the digital download thing, I was kind of complaining about that for a few years because I saw a lot of my songs up, on the net that you could buy them for 99 cents for digital download, and I wasn't getting any of that money at all. And then Best Buy, the big chain store, even put a bunch of songs up there, and there was a Rod Stewart old standard that he had put up there, and there was one of my songs by my 60s band HMS Bounty that was a hit called Things. That was up there. And so all of a sudden, the publisher of one of those old standards said, wait a minute, are we getting paid for this? I don't remember signing anything saying that they could do this. And so they had a class action suit against Best Buy, and they just went and grabbed a bunch of tunes and put them up there without getting anybody's permission. And it's easy. It's called a user's licensing permit, and that you agree to pay a certain little percentage, for what you make off of it. And Best Buy's legal department dropped the ball there, and they didn't license it. But anyhow, about YouTube and everything, one of the ways I've been making money off of my songs for years, of course, is through ASCAP, the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers. And when we first started out in the 60s, you got 2.5 cents per airplay on the radio. Well, now it's up to a nickel a play. And ASCAP collects that for a small percentage, and they send you a check every quarter. So it's important to copyright your songs and then either join ASCAP or BMI, and that way you get your airplay songwriting royalties. Well, then as far as YouTube goes, for a long time there was a big problem with the copyright thing, that people weren't getting paid because because YouTube didn't pay for plays. Well, now there's something that I signed up for called AdRev, and it's ADREV. And what they do is they put a little 30-second ad before your video comes on at YouTube, and it pays pretty good. And I think in a 6-month period, I made $1,900 for little ads they put on my at the beginning of my videos, and so that really helps. And what I tell young bands to do is to do that if they put a video up there. And also something they can do, there's not as many record companies as there used to be. As we know, in the 50s and the 60s and even the 70s, there was a lot of independent labels, which there aren't as many now. The big labels have kind of swallowed up all of the smaller ones. But you can go on the Internet and get a list of record companies and email your video that's on YouTube to the record companies. And I know that's how Justin Bieber got discovered. He just did some production and got the money together. I think his family helped him and made a fairly decent video, and he got somebody interested in him. And then the other thing I tell young bands to do if they have a CD printed up is to look up college radio. In college radio, U2, the band U2, kind of got started through college radio in the United States before anybody knew them. And, some of the college people, they like something that's different, and they'll play it. And like what I did with this song, I sent out about 50 CDs of the single Signals from the Dome to radio stations, and then I realized, I could send them an MP3, which would save me a lot of money in postage, a CD, printing, the mailer, and the time it takes to get to the station, and then you hope the right person at the station gets it and it doesn't get lost. So when people started requesting the song, I started sending out MP3s of the song, which I think is what Thomas just played it from.
Yes.
So now I'm on close to 80 stations in a few weeks with this single, and some of those are rock and pop stations. And so I think for anybody starting out, that's a good way to go. Put your songs on MP3 first, and don't do a whole album to send to radio, because sometimes they get lost in all the songs. It's better to pick whatever you think is maybe your one best song that sounds like a radio-friendly hit, and send that out on an MP3. And I have had some stations come back and go, oh, we love it, but we'd rather have the actual hard copy CD to put in our library, so I'll go ahead and send them one of those. But yeah, there's ways now to take advantage of this new technology that we have and actually make money from it. But when it first started out, it was falling through the cracks, and a lot of people weren't getting paid for their work. But if you do the research, you can make it work for you.
Well, I'm glad you give out that advice. I mean, that's because it's very important that people do get credit and make what they deserve for doing their work,
Yeah.
We're going to take a break, folks. We'll be back in a few minutes. Or I think we're going to. Well, the computer has another. There we go.
There it is.
We'll be right back, folks. Have this afternoon instead of
another one.
Yeah, another one. Yeah, we had one 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, with Andrew Collins,
which was an awesome show, man. And he's promised to come back too, didn't he?
Yep. So We'll be working on that. I'm sure we'll be talking to Andrew soon about his...
Me and Klaus Donner have been trying to connect each other, but when he's awake, I'm asleep, and when he's asleep, I'm awake. And
we'll get Klaus back on too. He's called me too, and I would just missed the call, but yeah, But
it's hard to coordinate some of this, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but that's the interesting thing about Revolution Radio is we're dealing with people in Europe, and we're on the East Coast, and so we're
trying to coordinate on the West Coast.
Yeah,
he got up early to come on this morning.
But Merrell, you have your autobiography, getting close to being released to the public. What did you learn about yourself while writing your autobiography?
I learned that my memory was fading, Mark. I started it in 1990 because people kept telling me, my God, you've led such an interesting life, way different than a normal rock star, that I played with lots of different people and everything, and then through different music trends, and then I go off in 1973 and moved to an island in the middle of the Pacific and started exploring ancient ruins.
You started in Louisville, Kentucky, right?
Exactly. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. My dad was a flight instructor and a machinist, and he was actually an Indianapolis race car driver, Merrell Fankhauser. You can look him up. There's even a dedication to him at my website, and on YouTube you can see some of his race cars, and it's on a song called Race Night, and it's old film footage that was digitized. He was in 2 movies, one with Clark Gable and Barbara Stanwyck called The Big Wheel. No, that was called To Please a Lady, the one with Clark Gable. And then he was in another one with Mickey Rooney called The Big Wheel, and they were both racing movies. And my dad had this race car that he had built, hand-built, and it had a pear-shaped grill, so it stood out in the movie. And I remember when we went to the movies when I was a little kid and saw it, and my mom would go, "There's Daddy's race car, there's Daddy's race car." So I grew up in rural Louisville, and I was always going out in the woods and exploring stuff and catching fish and crawdads and everything, and so that's where the book starts out. And then my dad kept saying, I'm tired of these cold, snowy winters here in Kentucky. And he kept putting dreams of California in our head, that we were going to someday move to California. And I thought, oh boy, that'd be great. I get to meet Roy Rogers and Gene Autry. And so the whole trip of us driving out to California with a race car on the trailer and everything is in the book, and that's where it starts out. And I remember on my 11th birthday, they bought me a ukulele, and that's when I was hooked. And my dad played guitar and 5-string banjo a little bit, and he had played in some Dixieland bands, and my mom had actually sang in some big bands when she was a teenager back in the early, mid-30s and early 40s. And so I always had music in my house, and before I knew it, I was writing little tunes on my ukulele at the age of 11. And then we ended up taking over a glider port, a sailplane port in Southern California. So I've lived on at least 3 different airports, and all of the stories are in there, and how I first started playing music and how I ended up being the house band with my teenage band, the Impacts, in 1962, and we started writing instrumentals before the term was coined surf music. Nobody had ever even heard that, and we got discovered in 1962 by a talent scout from Delphi Records that had put out Richie Valens and Bobby Fuller and a bunch of other instrumental bands, and they put out our Wipeout album, and it was a big hit. And it goes on from there up till very recently, up till about a year or so ago, and hopefully the book will be out. It's all done now. I've proofread the final copy, and it's called Calling from a Star, the Merrell Fankhauser story, and it's on Gonzo Multimedia Publishing out of London, and it'll be available worldwide, and it'll be on Amazon and at select bookstores all over the world.
Well, that's awesome. I can't wait, because that's one book I'm going to definitely read. I've known about you since the Wipeout days, and I've always enjoyed surf music. There's several bands out there that do some awesome stuff with the same genre, and it's unique. It's just not mainstream for some reason.
Yeah, it's
which I don't understand, because it's awesome. It's got, it's pretty awesome to me.
It had that feeling of the ocean, and I remember that's what I was trying to emulate with some of those instrumentals, the power of a wave and everything. And then, it ended up being big in Europe, and it ended up being big in Japan, and I would have people interviewing me from Japan and putting it in magazines, in Japanese, and everybody seemed to have the same feeling that because there were no words, the feeling and the sound of the music transcended the language barrier. They got it, they could tell what you were trying to do. And then I remember in the late 80s and 90s, I was getting letters and phone calls, if they could find my number, from young guitar players that were starting instrumental surf bands, and they'd want to know, what kind of guitar did you use on that to get that sound, and what kind of amplifier did you use? Well, back then we were all using tube amplifiers that had that sound, and this was even before Fender had invented that reverb that they started putting in the...
You pretty much had to build them.
Yeah, you had to build a reverb unit, or the reverb unit in the studio. They made chambers, and I remember some guy was interviewing me once on the radio, and he said, boy, if Fender hadn't invented that reverb unit, you guys wouldn't have had your sound. And I said, well, I hate to pop your bubble, but we played in a lot of auditoriums that had a natural echo, and that reverb you hear on our album was a chamber reverb that the guy that owned the studio had built. And there were several studios, including the one in the basement at Capitol Records in Hollywood, that was famous for this reverb sound. And the engineer told me, for some reason, when it rained, the dampness that got in this chamber, it was an actual building where they'd made the floor go round in the corners, and it was a microphone in one end and a speaker in the other end that created this reverb. And he said, every time it rains, everybody in town calls us up and wants to book the studio, because the reverb in there had a special sound when the walls got a little damp. So they didn't realize that we were doing this music, 1959, 1960, before Fender invented that reverb unit, which was either near the end of 62 or somewhere around there. And then the tube amplifier sound had a lot to do with it too. And then when they switched over sometime later in the 60s and they made all these transistor amps, they were real clean and everything, but it didn't have that same warm, fat sound. Then all of a sudden they got smart again in the late 80s, and they started remaking tube amplifiers.
Right. I think there's no replacement for them myself.
Yeah. Like we were talking, Thomas, the sound on vinyl, if you have a really good turntable and a good needle, the sound of vinyl is just superior to CD. I remember Neil Young wouldn't let him put any of his music on CD, he said, till they upped the sampling bit on it, because he said it took all the warmth out of his songs, and Eric Clapton said the same thing when
it took the emotions.
Yeah.
You could actually feel that the musician was actually putting into it.
Exactly. Eric Clapton said when they first put out some of his early Cream recordings, he hated it. He said it took all the distortion and the fatness out of my guitar.
Yeah, see, I'm a firm believer that music was meant to be heard live, but if you can't get it any other way, a vinyl album is the best. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, well, you've got a lot of people that'll agree with you.
I mean, I like CDs. I own one CD, and that's it, and that's Pink Floyd The Wall, and I'll never own another CD. I just don't have no use for them.
Uh-huh.
Thank
you for playing my MP3s.
Oh, now I do that on the computer because this is what we do, nowadays,
And I do have to admit that playing a CD or an MP3 is real convenient,
Right, and I mean, really, I'd rather you be playing it live.
Yeah. Well, I'd have to come to Georgia, and where are you at, Mark? I forgot where you're at.
In West Virginia.
West Virginia, yeah. I remember my dad was always talking about that old-time music program that came out of Wheeling, West Virginia, and that's what he would listen to a lot.
Yeah, WWVA.
That's it.
Yep. That's just down the street.
Wow. Boy.
So, speaking of being live, do you think you'll be doing a book signing tour or be around, touring with your band?
Well, what the publisher has mentioned that, and I've already had offers from several bookstores here in California to do it, and there's a chain of bookstores, Barnes and Noble. And I think they're going to start out with that and have me go out and do a book signing tour at all the Barnes and Noble stores.
Well, you'll have to keep us posted.
Yeah, if I get back there in your guys' neck of the woods, I'll sure let you know.
Yeah, that sounds good. Hopefully, one in Pittsburgh or Columbus will fly out there in the spring or so and come out and meet.
Notice he didn't say January.
Yeah.
It's like no one wants to be out here, during the snow and ice storms and all that. Just wait a nice spring day, get Merrell out here in the east, and I'll drive out there and see you. Hopefully you could play some music too.
Sure. We've got this beautiful stage here in my large backyard that that we built for the Tiki Lounge, and we had a guy that played with Bob Dylan and Carly Simon, Matthias Clark, on the show. Dean Torrance, Jan and Dean has been on the show. Canned Heat, the great blues band, has been here.
Oh, they're awesome.
Just a lot of people.
You're talking about your TV show, right?
Yeah, about the Tiki Lounge TV show, and we tape a new show every month, and I interview people, and then they play music, and most of the time I jam with them. I've had Willie Nelson on, Bonnie Raitt. I can't. A lot of '60s artists: Sky Saxon of the Seeds, the band Spirit that did I Got a Line on You. I had Sal Valentino from the Guess Who that did Laugh, Laugh, and just a long list. Mike Love of the Beach Boys. The show has been on for 14 years now, and it's broadcast all up and down the California coast on 2 TV stations, and then it's all over Hawaii and in Southern California, in Santa Monica. And then I was on in Battle Creek, Michigan, and Ann Arbor, but that ended last year due to some kind of funding that they had back there, a problem. But I'm still going to 3.5 million people, and you can see select shows on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you type in Merrell Fankhauser's Tiki Lounge TV show, a number of the half-an-hour shows will come up.
And you recently played with Jan and Dean?
Yeah, I played with Dean Torrance. Jan is no longer with us, and we have a beautiful concert auditorium called the Clark Center that's just a few miles from my house here, and everybody from Johnny Winter to who was it that just played there that I really loved? Some of the guys from the Byrds. And we did, it was actually last February, we did a concert over there, and he's got a great band now. He was the one that always did the real high vocal parts. And now he's got a bass player that does his high vocal parts, and he sings the lower parts that his partner Jan used to sing. And that was really a treat playing with those guys, because the band is so good, and they do all the Jan and Dean hits and some of the songs that the Beach Boys have done. And when I got up there, I started getting goosebumps, because here we had this 5-part harmony going with a full band, and the audience was just loving it. And we did a great version of Barbara Ann, and then we launched into Wipeout, and that really brought the house down. And then we ended with Fun, 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 and it was really a great night. And actually, you can look at that video, because Gonzo Multimedia licensed 50 of the shows, and they put them up on the internet for pay-per-view. So you can go to that pay-per-view site, and that particular concert with Dean Torrance is up there to be viewed.
Well, that's awesome.
And I didn't put in the 14 years I've been on the air, I really didn't put many up at YouTube to be viewed, as some of the stations that I was on really didn't want me to, put them on YouTube, because they wanted to be able to play the shows for a length of time and have people go to the station, the channel, and watch it, instead of being able to just dial into YouTube at any time. So now I've kind of made an agreement with the stations that I'm on about a month and a half after every show is already played. Then they let me go ahead and upload them to YouTube, and that's been really good, because people all over the world that way can see the current show.
Well, that's pretty awesome. I've seen a couple of them myself. You got one song that I really like, Alien Talk.
Oh, yeah.
It's cute. I like it.
Yeah, that's a standalone video, and Tina Marie really loved that, and she played it on her radio show the other night. And there's a funny story, Thomas, that I can tell real quick that went along with that song that inspired me to write that. There was this kind of interesting character that lived on Maui, and he lived out on the edge of the rainforest in a little village of Haiku, and he would drink at night, and sometimes I think he got into the Maui wowie refreshment a little too much. And this Hawaiian family lived just a little ways away from him, and they heard Bill, his name was Bill, shooting his pistol out in the garden. And he kept shooting, and he was yelling and stuff. And they went, what's going on with Bill? And they were afraid to go over there, so they called the police. The police came. Bill, what are you doing? They calmed him down, took his pistol away, and they could tell he was a little inebriated and high on something. He said, there's aliens in my garden. He said, they're out there. They're in my garden, and I got to get them out of here. I don't know what they're going to do to my plants. So they took him in town and let him sleep it off and everything. And the next couple days later, there was a headline in the Maui newspaper said, Haiku Man shoots at aliens in his banana patch. Well, it wasn't just his banana patch. It was his Maui Wowie patch. So I read the article and everything, and I knew the guy, and he was an interesting guy. I was surprised to hear he was actually shooting a gun, because he was really kind of a mellow, laid back dude, you know. And I said, there's got to be a song in there, and there it is. I sat down and started playing, and I thought, well, this needs to be kind of in a reggae beat. And so I started playing the rhythm in a reggae beat, and it's the same story. Got the band together and played the song and sang it to them, and, you know, in a few hours we had it recorded, and it's on YouTube, and it's on a couple of albums that I have out. And the one album I recorded with movie and record producer William E. McEwen, who discovered Steve Martin, the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and the Allman Brothers. And he recorded the Allman Brothers when they were called the Hourglass, before they changed their name to the Allman Brothers. But he helped me produce that song, and it's one of my favorites too, Thomas. I'm glad you like it, but there's the story behind that.
Well, I'm glad you said it, because it makes a little more reference to it. I encourage everybody, it is up on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's where I found it at, and this was before I even had met you.
Right.
And before Mark had introduced me to you. And,
so, that's going way back.
It's been a while.
Yeah, the early stages of Revolution Radio.
Oh, this was before Revolution Radio that I found it.
Have you seen the one where Willie Nelson and I are playing Wipeout, Thomas?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'll tell you, Wipeout is a timeless classic. It's never going to go out of style. You're always going to have fans who really like that song.
Well, Willie blew my mind, you know. We went over to his house the day before the concert that we knew we were going to do. And he said, well, what are you going to do, Merrell? And I named off a few songs. And I said, hey, let's do a version of Wipeout. And he says, sure enough, we'll do it. What key do you do it in? I said, I do it in C. So we're in the middle of the concert, and he said, let's do Wipeout now. He takes off his acoustic guitar and pulls out an electric Fender Stratocaster. And nobody had seen him apparently play an electric guitar. And there we are in front of 10,000 people, and we tear into the thing. And in the middle, I nod to him to do a solo, and he does a solo on this electric Fender that sounded like it came off of an old surf song somewhere. It sounded like it could have been in a Beach Boys record, and everybody just couldn't believe it, you know. And it was so good, and luckily we got that videoed, and that one's on YouTube. And afterwards I said, Willie, thanks a lot for playing that electric on that. And he said, I did that for you, Merrell. He's quite a guy. I love him. He's such a humble, mellow person.
I keep being told I look like him.
Really? There is a guy that impersonates him that tries to look like him, you know.
Oh,
but I've seen Willie with his braids cut off, and then I saw him when he grew his hair back.
He's been one of the ones that one of my favorite musicians too. I cover a lot of genre with the type of music I like. I don't stick with one particular genre, and I'm eclectic, I guess.
Yeah, he's got a house on Maui now. He, after he went through that thing where the IRS grabbed his ranch in Austin, and he said that they went in his studio and they confiscated a bunch of his gold records, and I don't think he ever got all of them back. They said they couldn't find them. Ha ha.
Well, they're probably being housed in the Smithsonian with the giants.
I think they're probably in some IRS agent's den, actually.
Yeah, hanging on
some of them. But you can go to Maui, and he made friends with a guy that owns a restaurant over there called Charlie's, and it's in a little town called Paia, and he's got 2 of the gold records in there on the wall, and it's pretty neat. And he bought a house there in the early 80s on the beach, and he's just one of the locals over there. Great guy.
Wow, that seems kind of, everybody thinks of him as a cowboy type,
Yeah. He's definitely that, but boy, he's,
cowboy
he can play
with a Hawaiian shirt now, huh?
Yeah, he's played with some of the Hawaiian legends over there. The concert we did, he had this Hawaiian legend called Willie K, who I knew this guy when he was a little kid. He used to come to my concerts, and his dad was a Hawaiian musician. Well, this guy, he can play a beautiful Hawaiian song with that real high voice that'll just, bring tears to your eyes, and then he can get down on a Stevie Ray Vaughan style blues song. He's really versatile. And when we were doing the concert, we did Crazy, and Willie K started singing it in a high voice. It sounded like Patsy Cline. And Willie Nelson started cracking up laughing so hard he could barely finish the song. A lot of fun.
Oh, I'll tell you what, this has been an eye-opening conversation today. It's I'm glad you give out that advice to up-and-coming artists. I think it's important that we hear this stuff from people who have lived their life through it and know their way around stuff. And a person like you is pretty much, in my opinion, a living legend. And I sure appreciate you coming on and talking to us today.
Well, thank you, Thomas. I really enjoyed it too, and going along with what you were just saying, I kind of learned how to change with the times. Some people just, decide, no, I'm just going to do it this one way. I mean, for years, people were telling me, you need a website, and I held out for quite a while till I got one, and now I'm so glad I did, because like I was telling Mark the other day, I have over 40 albums out now, and in the old days,
wow.
Labels from Europe would want to license stuff from me, and Japan, and it would take 3 months sending all the paperwork back, then the masters, and then the photographs for the artwork and everything. Now I can do one in 2 to 3 weeks through the computer. It's just sped up the process so much. They can send me the contracts. I can sign them. They send them through the computer. We negotiate them. You don't, like to get mail to Europe, it's 10 days to 2 weeks, and I'd have to wait for these contracts to go back and forth. And
we used to get our news that way too.
Exactly.
It's all simultaneous now.
Yeah. So it's really helped out, and I'm glad that I've proceeded on to be able to do this through the computer and the internet.
people in our age, we've seen a lot. We've seen a whole bunch of things change. I'm pretty much in the same age group as you are. Mark's a youngin' still. I got kids his age.
Yeah.
But he's the up and coming generation, and they are doing things at lightning speed compared to what we were able to do things.
Exactly. That's very true. And Mark, I have to thank you so much for helping me, promote this new single, because he's booked me, Thomas, with so many great hosts like you and everything, and it's really helping.
Oh, I'll tell you what, I wouldn't have a show today if it wasn't for Mark. Mark has helped me from my very first show back close to 4 years now.
Wow.
And, that's what I forced him to get on the air with me. I told him, wait a minute, you're coming on air with me after about the first year or so.
Oh, that's great.
I hated taking all the limelight.
It's just been a great experience. I don't know what you call this, just being involved in.
Or not limelight, blame, I should say.
Yeah. But I'm really thrilled doing this on a weekly basis, or this week's going to be two shows working with you, Thomas, and just having a chance to talk with Merrell on somewhat regular basis. This is really an exciting job. It's really not even work. It's just fun.
Well, that's my opinion on it. We get to learn new things. We get to learn old things that we should have knew already, but don't.
Yeah.
And it's just been eye-opening. Like Merrell was saying, the history from his point of view in the music industry, we don't ever get to see it because we're not musicians.
Right.
We're on the outside, and he's on the inside of what's going on. And I love shows like this. It's a lot more interesting than the sky is falling.
The behind the scenes story, what Merrell's been talking about with the archives being found in the insulated truck in the desert. Those behind the scenes stories, and talking about the creative process with John Lennon. That's really some great stories behind
the actual history.
I find that more interesting than some of the okay, I wrote this song here. But hearing the whole story behind it's really neat. And like another topic we could touch on briefly was Nicky Hopkins influential in any aspect of writing the Domes song?
I don't know. Nicky and I were such dear friends, and I loved working with him, and that really hit me hard when he passed, And there's that song that Pete Sears and I from the Jefferson Starship recorded called Nicky's Song, and that's our tribute to Nicky that's on YouTube that you can see. And for those that don't know who Nicky Hopkins is, he's a fabulous British piano player that played on John Lennon's Imagine. He played on Beatle records. He played on the Rolling Stones records. And what a lot of people don't know is he played on the version of For All the Girls I've Loved Before with Willie Nelson and Julio Iglesias. In fact, Nicky arranged that song, besides played piano on it. And Nicky's playing on my Return to Moo album and a few other things that I did. But, yeah, in my book, he is the all-time greatest unsung hero piano player of rock and roll. He is, if you look him up on the internet, the list of famous people that he's played piano on their recordings is phenomenal. I mean, The Who, The Grateful Dead,
he was at Woodstock with the Jefferson Airplane.
Yes, Quicksilver Messenger Service. He's on that video that the Rolling Stones did, the something circus thing. But the list...
The Rock and Roll Circus?
Yes. The list just goes on and on and on. And I had him on my earlier TV show that I did in the 90s. It was on satellite called California Music. And I was going to about 15 million people for 3.5 years on that show. And that's, Nikki and I had met somewhere in the 60s. We remembered, we thought it was at a concert in San Francisco, and just said hi in passing backstage, walking down a hallway, and that was it. And then when he came on my show, California Music, I got to interview him, I got to jam with him, and we had Pat Benatar's bass player, Roger Capps, playing with us. And we actually ended up making 2 TV shows out of that went national on satellite. And after he and I met in 1990, I think it was, we were fast friends. And whenever he was in the area, he was staying at my house, and we did a couple of concerts together besides recording. But that guy has influenced so many people in his piano playing and style that you never know. Maybe some of Nicky was coming through me on messages from the Dome.
Yeah. Well, I think Nicky did the opening of the Stones' Angie, and he has a long solo, a piano solo in Jeff Beck's Rice Pudding.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Wow, Mark, you got a lot of knowledge of rock and roll too, don't you?
See, that's what gets me, Thomas. I told him the other night when we were talking for quite a while. I said, "Gee, Mark, you're quite a historian." I mean, it really, it's amazing to me that, he is younger than us, like you said, but he knows and he appreciates all of this.
Right.
It always makes me feel good when I meet a younger person that, likes that music and knows who made it, because my friend William McEwen, he was frustrated when CDs came out because you didn't have that big canvas of the LP cover anymore that had who produced the songs, who wrote the songs, who played on it, all in big print. And he said that was half of the fun. You'd listen to the record and you'd read the album.
Right.
And a lot of people, they just have a favorite song that they put on their iPod, and they have no knowledge of anything that went into making that music. And here, Mark knows a lot of this history.
Yeah, a lot of the record companies had studio artists.
Yeah.
Studio artists never got their claim to fame. They were famous and people enjoyed their music, but nobody knew who they were.
That's exactly right. Like, there were so many studio musicians. I got to know them because I worked with a lot of them, in the 60s. But studio musicians that played on the Beach Boys records that never got their name on an album cover. You'd think, oh boy, this Beach Boys band is really great. You didn't know they had an arsenal of professional musicians playing a lot of those parts on their records that were never acknowledged. They only put the names of the band on the album sleeve, and right. But a lot of those people, because of history books on music that have been written, people know about it now.
Jimi Hendrix played for B.B. King's band for years.
He played for Little Richard, too.
Yep. Yes, he did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
People just don't know this history, and it's sad that it, like you said, I find it very appealing that a younger person does know a lot of this stuff like Mark, and people younger than Mark know this stuff.
Yeah.
I was so surprised, and I believe it's because of people like you that do come out and talk to other people about it, and I appreciate that.
Yeah,
and I think there's a little bit of I have hope for humanity.
Yeah, there you go, Thomas. I agree. And that's what I was telling you. I was so impressed in the late 80s and early 90s when these like 20-some-year-old guitar players were getting a hold of me and asking me, what chords did you play on that? And what kind of guitar and amp were you using? And we got our little band here, and we're trying to do vintage instrumental surf. Do you mind if we send you a song and give us some feedback? And I thought, wow, this is really great. After all of these years, who would think that it would be, inspiring young up-and-coming musicians?
Oh, I think the song Wipeout itself is going to inspire a lot of musicians in the years to come. I think it's timeless. It definitely gets airplay still. And a lot of the younger people at first don't know what the song is when I ask them if they've ever heard it. But as soon as I tap out a few finger rolls on the table, they know the song.
Yeah, and we were all inspired by early instrumental groups. Number one, the Ventures, who I got to meet and know all of them. I even had the lead guitar player, Noki Edwards, teach me a few of their songs in the dressing room once when we were playing a double bill with them here at the Pismo Beach Rose Garden Ballroom. And they were just nice guys, and I really liked them all. And then before that, it was bands like the Champs that did Tequila. And I was playing in a band called the Rebels that had a song in the movie Pulp Fiction called Comanche. Well, we had earlier done a song called Church Key, and it was about when you needed a church key, they called it, the opener to open a beer can. And it would go pop, psh, church key. Well, a dozen surf bands re-recorded that song. So we were influenced by all of those early instrumental bands before, like I said, they even coined the term instrumental surf music. And it was a great time to, be playing guitar and being able to experiment and do something innovative and different.
I might have the movie wrong, but have you ever seen the movie Samurai Guitar?
No.
I believe that's the name of the movie. The whole movie is nothing. They don't hardly talk in the movie. It's mostly surf music, and it's pretty awesome.
I've never seen that one.
I'll have to find it and send it to y'all.
I've never even heard of it.
The music is definitely inspired by what you done.
What got me was in a lot of these movies that the producer Quentin Tarantino does, he loved that music, and the early surf music and that early kind of crossover pop rock R&B stuff, and he would sit around listening to that to put it in all of his movies.
Thomas, what was the name of that song again?
Movie? It's Samurai Guitar, I think is the name of it, but I'm not positive. But it's pretty awesome. The music is definitely inspired by the song Wipeout. I don't care what anybody says.
Huh. I'd have people in Hawaii that they thought they'd get Wipeout and Pipeline mixed up, and they'd come up to me and they'd go, and I go, no, that's Pipeline. And one time I was playing somewhere, and this Hawaiian guy in the audience, it was in Hawaii, and he says, hey, bro, play Pipilini. And I go, Pipilini? He goes, yeah, Pipilini. I went, oh, Pipeline. he was pronouncing it the way it was spelled, you know. Pee Leany, that stuck with me. That was a good one.
But speaking of that, you have a song. It's basically the same idea, but the song you do with your son Tim is Barrel Ride.
Oh yeah.
That's basically another surf term.
Yeah. And then the song that I did with my son Tim, Monster Swell, that was actually in a kind of a B science fiction movie out here called The Omega Diary. And that, is a Monster Swell talking about big waves. And that song to me really has that same kind of feeling like a Wipeout type song. And there's a few songs on this new Signals from Malibu that get into that area also with the heavy drum beats and stuff. And there's more up-tempo instrumental surf stuff on the Signals from Malibu. The pieces that you guys played are more in, like somebody said, an eerie kind of sci-fi sounding.
I thought they were awesome.
Thing, but there's stuff in there for the hardcore instrumental surf lovers too on this new album.
I got to ask you do know how to surf, right?
Oh yeah, I started out as soon as I moved to the beach. As soon as my dad moved us to the beach, and I'm only 2 miles from the ocean here, I started surfing and then when I moved to Maui, oh man, I was in heaven because you didn't have to wear any wetsuit or anything. You had that warm water, but I ended up getting a melanoma on my left shoulder from too many years in the sun over there. I was telling Mark about that, and I had to have that operated on a year or so ago.
Well, that's a bummer.
Yeah, and I had no idea. For anybody that has an odd mole or something that gets sore, go have it checked out right away, because mine just looked like a kind of a pink mole, but it got sore, and when I had him biopsy it, the doctor called me up and said, "You got stage 3 cancer," and I had no idea. I had a tumor as big as a golf ball with tentacles growing under that thing, and they caught it just in time. They said it was like 0.5 of a millimeter of breaking out and going into my lymph node, so I got it just in time.
I'm glad they found it.
Yeah.
Able to take care of it. So use sunscreen, especially nowadays.
Yeah, see, back then we didn't use sunscreen.
Didn't have it.
No, we didn't know anything about it. In Hawaii, they would put aloe vera on, and the Hawaiians showed us that. I used to know guys that would grease up with Pennzoil, too.
Oh, that doesn't sound too smart.
No. And it was Royal Triton was the other, that Union oil. It was the purple stuff that people would use on their shoulders sometimes.
Mark, what was that a link for?
That was for Nikki playing in Jeff Beck's Rice Pudding.
Okay, I posted it in the chat room. I wanted to make sure they understood what it was for before I...
Mm-hmm. And Nikki's song is on YouTube that I mentioned, the song that Pete Sears and I dedicated to him.
Yeah, I believe I've heard that song.
Yeah, and that's on your On the Blue Road CD.
Yeah, it's on the Blue Road CD that has the drummer from Spirit playing with me, Ed Cassidy.
That's pretty awesome. We're going to go to a break, folks, and we'll be back in just a minute. Wow. We'd sure appreciate it. And y'all ain't got but about another month or so to get the 2013 Best of the Hosts CD for $30 donation. And it's all the shows for your favorite host. You just have to make sure that you put in there that's for the particular show, because some shows Some hosts have more than one shows. Oh, I'm tripping over my tongue already, Mark, and I ain't even tried to say our guest's name at all today. So I know both of you guys got stuff to do, but I want to make sure that everybody knows how to get a hold of Merrell, and I'll let you pick it up from there, Mark.
Okay, Merrell, do you want to tell everyone how they can get, how and when they can get the new CD? Your autobiography's coming out soon. Hopefully, some Barnes and Noble book signings in the springtime. How do we get a hold of you, Merrell?
Well, the new Signals from Malibu that you guys played two of the songs from, that album, the full-length CD, will be available here right before the 1st of December, and they can order that by going to merrellfankhauser.com, and you can also email me from there. That's merrellfankhauser.com. And about the 1st of January, my book, Calling from a Star, the Merrell Fankhauser story, will be out and available everywhere online and at bookstores all across the United States. And that's our new stuff that we have coming out for the first of the year.
Okay. Cool. So you have a whole bunch of new projects to be promoting over the next couple months. You'll be on Dr. Bob Hieronymus's show on 21st Century Radio in a couple Sundays from now. It's Sunday the 30th.
Right, I'll be on there on the 30th.
Probably 8 to 10, or is it both hours?
I think that's what it is, yeah.
8 to 10 Eastern Time.
Right.
I'm sure you'll be on a bunch more radio shows sometime soon, so you'll be all over the media discussing these latest projects.
Yes.
So, we really appreciate you, Merrell, being on for over 2 hours today.
Oh, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's just been an awesome show to me.
Yes, it seems like it's only been about 20 minutes long.
Yeah, it goes by fast. Well, I want to thank you both, Mark and Thomas, for having me on, and it's just great to talk with you all.
I'm going to play your one song right after you drop out, and hopefully people will call in and we'll talk some more about it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, you guys.
Enjoy getting back in the studio here in a few minutes, and keep us posted. We'll have to read your book, then have you back on.
Even though you've done so many interviews, I hope we've made a little bit of an impression on you, and you remember the old redneck and the ex-history teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, great. I'll try to get back with you guys in January.
That would be great.
All right. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you, Merrell. It's been fun.
Thanks, Merrell. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Mark, that was awesome, if you ask me.
Yeah, I don't know, like, how many other rock and roll guys are going to spend nearly 2.5 hours just talking to a couple people like you and me, and just sit there and just
a redneck and an ex-history teacher.
Yeah, and just sit there and just talk about working with Nicky Hopkins and John Lennon. I mean, it's like I never thought I'd ever be doing this, and Merrell just takes time out of his day to tell us about his projects that are going to be available soon. They're very worthy, interesting projects. The music's great,
and the man is full of energy for his age.
Yeah.
I find it very refreshing.
I'll be turning 71 about 5 weeks from now, I think. So, this has been just a great Sunday afternoon discussion.
I'm going to let everybody know that the number is 347-688-2902. You can call in and we can get a roundtable going for the next 45 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and, since I've got the power, I'm going to play the one I like the most again, and that is Messages from the Dome. So here we go, folks. If it'll be polite and play for me. There it goes.